Well, Alexander Titov is a lecturer in modern European history at Queen's University in Belfast. He joins us now to talk about what we can expect out of these talks. Thanks so much for joining us, Alexander. As regards Syria, how complicated could this get, given reports now that Turkish-backed troops are fighting Russian-backed regime forces in spite of an earlier agreement not to?
Yes, I think there's always the complication of how much control each side has of the various troops on the ground. But overall picture seems to be that Russians and the Turks have agreed overall plan of de facto division of Syria into zone of influence, and Americans were also involved in that. So there is overall agreement. How it's implemented on the ground always been difficult, but I think this overall agreement will probably stick in the immediate future.
But you don't expect any major falling out over what is actually occurring on the ground by indirectly?
I don't think so. I think there is a kind of very deep interest in both sides to see this agreement, stick to this agreement, because they still recovering from the previous fallout over the shot Russian jets. They don't want to deteriorate their positions. They need both. They need each other in Turkey, and they don't really have that much to gain from another fallout. So I think they'll try to keep the forces which fighting on their behalf within reasonable limits.
Okay. Do you think Turkey, though, will get the support it would hope for from Russia in fighting Kurdish forces in Syria?
I'm not sure it will be necessarily a direct help to Turkey. The problem with the Kurds is not so much the Russians, it's the Americans, because Americans relying on the Kurds, as the main troops on the ground in the fight against Daesh, against ISIS. Russia is relying on Assad regime and its allied forces. So the Kurds is not the main issue for Russians. They're really the American, primarily American. And American patronage. But as I said, I think there seems to be some sort of broad agreement, at least on the top level, that Turkish interest should be recognized in Turkey within Syria, essentially that the Kurds are not using Syrian territory for attacks against inside Turkey, which is a kind of reasonable and legitimate requirement, and I think both Americans and the Russians agree with it. How it will be implemented in practice is always a sticking point in Syria, but that's what it is.
Let's quickly finish with the bigger picture question here then. How do you expect the Russia-Turkey relationship to develop from here on, especially given the economic reliance on each other?
Yeah, I think the fallout from the in a couple of years ago, when they went in de facto, suspended their relations, showed to both countries that they really need each other, both in economic terms. Russia is still suffering from Western sanctions and needs Turkey for that. And Turkey also relies on Russia for a variety of goods, from energy to tourism and so forth. So they basically need each other. However, it's still it's impossible to go back to the previous relations, but I think they will have to build up relations in the long term, because basically they can't deal either in Syria or in economic terms in economy without each other. But this really calls for both Turkey and Russia to recognize that they have to compromise on issues with each other, and then they can get away. They bound together. That's their long-term relationship.
Okay, Alexander Titov, thank you so much for joining us from Belfast.